Brown-Fuller to move the motion.
Thank you, Sir Christopher. I beg to move that this House has considered maternity services. Thank you. It is an honour to serve under your chairmanship, Sir Christopher. And I would also like to thank all the members in attendance for their interest in this important topic, and the Backbench Business Committee for allocating time to debate maternity services in England. On average, a baby is born in England every 56 seconds. Over 1,500 babies each day, most of them delivered in an NHS setting with the help and support of a maternity department or at home with an NHS community midwife by their side. It's over 500,000 babies every year. I contributed to that statistic in 2014 and 2019 when I gave birth to my children at St Richard's Hospital in Chichester. Two very different births that I will not spend my valuable time in this debate reflecting on, Chair, because there are far more important voices that need to be heard and considered. A person is at their most vulnerable moment when they or their partner go into labour. You put your health, your safety, the safety of your unborn child into the hands of professionals that work in that setting. The midwives, the obstetricians, the anaesthetists, the neonatologists, to support you in the safe delivery of your child and get you all home safe. And in the majority of births, that is the case. However, several investigations have revealed fundamental flaws in how maternity care is delivered across England. A Care Quality Commission inspection of 131 maternity units found that 65% were not safe for women to give birth in, with studies showing that 1/5 of all causes of stillbirth are potentially preventable. The Ockenden report, led by Donna Ockenden, investigated the maternity services at the Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust, but it highlighted the flaws in maternity care across England. The report laid out immediate and essential actions which are key to reforming maternity services and ensuring that every mother and baby receives the care they deserve and should expect. Donna reflected in her report that sometimes that spotlight can feel harsh to staff on the front line, doing their very best in what are often extremely challenging circumstances. In conversation with midwives and others working in the maternity care sector, I recognised that each one I spoke to entered the profession as a calling or a vocation or a passion for supporting mothers to bring their babies into the world. They are frontline NHS staff who often go above and beyond the call of duty to support and care for their patients in those extraordinary hours and days. Midwives in particular spend significant time with expectant mothers, supporting them through all stages of pregnancy and birth. They see women at their most vulnerable. They act as therapists, teachers, friends and maternal figures, yet across the country, staffing levels are inadequate. In 2023, midwives and support workers worked over 100,000 hours of unpaid overtime every week. The pressure and stress on them is immense, and this leads to burnout, absenteeism, high staff turnover, and the loss of experienced professionals from the field. And this ultimately puts patient safety at risk.
On that note, the Honourable Lady.
Happily give way.
Thank you, and I want to congratulate the Honourable Lady on bringing forward this debate and the excellent and persuasive way that she's making her case. On that issue of burnout, does she agree that one of the biggest issues is that when a tragedy happens, often midwives and obstetricians feel that if they speak out, there's a risk that they or their institution will get sued or they could get fired from their jobs? And litigation reform to try and change the rules of the game so that people are able to be open when they think they've made a mistake and learn from those mistakes is one of the most important ways that we could improve the record on patient safety that is of concern to her as it is to me.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and I agree wholeheartedly that we need to change the way that we do litigation, because NHS trusts often argue that they want to learn and they want to grow from experiences that are poor, and yet the litigation system that we're working in means that they rarely have the opportunity to do so because everybody is so afraid to speak out. So we need to change that culture within maternity services and the NHS as a whole. As a country, we are training more midwives than ever before. Yet retention remains a problem, and the pandemic exacerbated an already difficult situation, with highly trained midwives with families or caring responsibilities leaving the profession too soon.
On that
honourable friend give way.
Happily give way.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I congratulate you on bringing this debate to this chamber today. Frimley Park Hospital in my constituency in 2023 received an outstanding report from the Care Quality Commission, but it nonetheless identified inadequate staffing remains one of the highest risks on the maternity register, and that has daily implications. Many midwives reported, for example, that daily checks were often incomplete, handovers were interrupted and not standardised, and mandatory training was often not completed. Does my honourable friend agree with me that to ensure high-quality maternity care from the point of entry and admission to discharge requires not only stringent oversight by trust boards, but also far greater care for staff in the setting of the hospital itself, providing safe spaces where conversations can be had, where handovers can take place, where nurses can rest. And in that way, we'll both retain and also hopefully recruit more of our vital nursing staff.
Brown-Fuller.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention, and he's absolutely right. The key to providing strong maternity services that benefit both the staff and the patients is making sure that you have a full workforce so that they can do not just the need-to-haves, but the nice-to-haves in a maternity department as well, that can make such a difference to patient experience when they're going through that service. And this retention issue that we have directly impacts training, because newly qualified and inexperienced midwives need experienced mentors. But if seasoned professionals leave, the next generation lacks the support necessary to transition into leadership roles. Midwives and other maternity staff must train together at every level to be fully equipped for every situation and ensure that concerns can be escalated effectively. And that is why the Ockenden Report and the Royal College of Midwives seek a commitment to including midwives in the long-term workforce plan. In 2017, bursaries for student nurses and midwives were ended, with the Royal College of Midwives warning that this decision threatened the future of our maternity services in England. Now, this has led to a third of midwifery students having debts exceeding £40,000, with 80% of midwifery students knowing someone who has dropped out of their course due to financial hardship. Many also take on additional jobs to avoid their studies, which then detracts from their vital training. To mitigate these pressures on trainee midwives, I encourage the government to explore alternative routes to support midwifery and nursing students, which has been laid out by the Royal College of Midwives through new funding options, or a scheme where student debt is forgiven after a defined period of service in the NHS. A similar funding issue affects apprenticeship schemes in midwifery. Despite receiving overwhelmingly positive feedback from trusts across the country with regards to the apprenticeship route, many trusts cannot afford to offer these positions due to a lack of backfill funds. So trusts are often handing back their apprenticeship levy as the scheme is undeliverable. So I hope the Minister will work with her colleagues in the Department of Education to address this fundamental flaw in the delivery of Level 6 and Level 7 apprenticeships that have proven to deliver the midwives of the future. So, Christopher, in preparing for today's debate, I was invited to my local maternity unit at St Richard's Hospital in Chichester, where I mentioned I had both of my children. University Hospital Sussex had its maternity services inspected by the CQC in September 2021, which found all hospitals across the trust to be inadequate or requiring improvement. Although there hasn't been a formal inspection since, the Trust assures me that all actions from the CQC have been completed, with the majority of the Ockenden IEAs implemented. But to fully implement all of the IEAs will require funding, which currently the Trust doesn't have. St Richard's Hospital confidently tells me it's now fully staffed for the first time in a long time, and the Director of Maternity Services is keen to look at how she can further improve patient experience and communication. I know colleagues across the House are keen to work with their NHS trusts constructively to ensure the best outcomes possible for their constituents. And I was reassured by the senior leadership team, those working in the department and the new parents on the ward that I had the pleasure of congratulating. Probably the best moment of recess is introducing tiny babies to the world. And very bizarre for those parents as well when the MP walks in and says, "Oh, can I say hello?" And I'm pleased that the Trust is taking its responsibility to provide a much improved service seriously. So, Christopher, it would be a missed opportunity if I, as the chair of the APPG for infant feeding, did not mention how much more we can be doing as a society to support mothers to breastfeed if they choose to. but the UK's breastfeeding rates are among the lowest in the world. Only 1% of mothers exclusively breastfeed at 6 months, despite the World Health Organization recommendations for exclusive breastfeeding for this period and continuation alongside nutritious foods for up to 2 years. 44% of surveyed mothers wish that they'd breastfed for longer and would have done if they'd had better and more tailored support. New mothers need time, expertise and evidence-based information to make informed decisions on their feeding choices, and maternity services play a key role in establishing a feeding plan that works for mother and baby before they go home. But community midwifery and health visiting services have been vaporised across the country, and so support is patchy, often delivered by volunteers or midwives in their spare time. I hope that the government will support improved community services such as milk support groups to give all women, regardless of their feeding choices, somewhere to turn to when they need support. Now, I'm going to take the opportunity, perhaps selfishly, to get the name of one of the coolest kids I ever met on the record. Benedict Henry Goodfellow was an absolute dude, and I'm not going to cry. I'm proud to call his mum, Steph, one of my close friends and the strongest woman that I know. And this is why this debate is so important to me, because Bendy needed 24-hour care since birth after a case of extreme birth trauma left him with devastating neurological damage. Bendy was loved by everyone that came into contact with him until he died, aged 10. The experience left Steph traumatised and profoundly changed. Bendy was born nearly 30 years ago, and yet Steph and Ben's story is still just as relevant today, and it shouldn't be. I'm immensely grateful to Donna Ockenden for putting me in touch with families from across the country ahead of this debate, including Leeds, Nottingham, Shrewsbury and Sussex, to hear their personal experiences of failures in maternity care. Happily give way.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing that. On the point of Leeds, as a member for Leeds North West, you may have spoken to some of my constituents who tragically, Dan and Fiona, lost their baby Aliona after only 27 minutes. And despite the fact that the inquest found a number of gross failings, the figures out only last night at Leeds are pretty horrifying to see. Does my honourable member agree with me there are grounds for an independent review about the maternity services at Leeds?
I thank the honourable member for her intervention, and she's absolutely right to raise the case of Dan and Fiona, and I was lucky enough to have them give up their time to share their story with me, which was heartbreaking. And they are at the forefront of this fight to have an independent inquiry at Leeds, and I know that the Secretary of State for Health did say that he would go away and investigate whether there was cause for an investigation, but those families are still waiting to find out if that will go ahead. And the reason I wanted to meet with families like Dan and Fiona is to ensure that the questions I am asking the Minister today are the questions that those families would be asking if they had the opportunity to be standing here. Because I cannot begin to imagine how exhausting it is reliving the moments that their lives changed forever, over and over again, in the pursuit of better outcomes for the next family. So I will include a number of their questions to the Minister in my closing remarks, but I would just like to reflect that the families who were able to share their experiences with me were overwhelmingly white, middle class, often highly educated, and many with medical backgrounds or academic careers before going through this trauma. The Lord Darcy report found that black women are almost 3 times as likely as white women to die in childbirth, and neonatal mortality in the most deprived areas is more than double that in the least deprived. Who is speaking up for those families? Who is ensuring that transparency and accountability is there for those who have a fundamental distrust of the medical profession, or have learning disabilities, or who have English as their second language, and they are not supported in navigating the complex systems that are in place? Negligence claims in obstetrics account for just 13% of the volume of litigation received by NHS resolution in 23-24, but nearly 60% of the total cost of clinical negligence claims, totalling over £1 billion every year. Beyond financial costs, these failures carry a devastating human toll. If we truly invest in our maternity services, in both the professionals and the facilities, more than money is saved, lives are saved. So in conclusion, Sir Christopher, I would like to ask the following questions of the Minister. Firstly, the previous government was supportive of the Ockenden review, and previous health ministers had made assurances that maternity services were going to get the support they so desperately needed. I know the Secretary of State for Health is supportive of the Ockenden review and has met with many of the bereaved parents since the general election. In that meeting, the Secretary of State assured those parents that fixing maternity is a priority for this government and that actions would be outlined publicly before Christmas 2024. He then came back shortly after Christmas saying they needed more time. So this is now 2 months overdue, so can the Minister assure me that those families will hear an update in the near future? Does the government support all of the Ockenden report immediate and essential actions arising from the review into the Shrewsbury and Telford Trust? And how will the government ensure all ICBs and trusts across the UK implement all of the actions? And what support will be provided to the trusts to achieve this and to prevent a postcode lottery of maternity care? If these IEAs are implemented, what will the government's measure of success be? As we currently have no national data regarding preventable deaths, it's the charitable sector that have determined over 800 baby deaths a year could have been prevented. One of the IEAs is a long-term plan to secure a safe maternity workforce and improve training. So can we expect to see maternity care professionals, including neonatologists, obstetricians and anaesthetists, alongside midwifery colleagues, included in the refresh of the 10-year workforce plan for the NHS? An overriding theme in my conversations with bereaved parents was a hesitancy to prosecute from the CQC. Cases were often supported in the first instance, with the families then informed just days before the 3-year statute of limitations expires that they will no longer be seeking a prosecution, and those families having no time to appeal that decision. So does the Minister believe that a 3-year statute of limitation is appropriate when often families dealing with bereavement are not even considering a case in the first 12 months? And does the Minister have any concerns with the abilities of CQC as a regulator, or does she agree with the parents that there is a reluctance to prosecute with the leadership of CQC when there have been failures in patient care? Does the Minister support the calls from both SANS and Tommy's charities for all triage phone lines to be recorded, as currently they are not? And finally, parents repeatedly reported to me that the bereavement care they received felt like a tick box exercise, with a lot of the focus on the mother and a lack of communication and support for the father when both have suffered that bereavement. So does the Minister agree that communication could be vastly improved across maternity services in all cases, so both parents have the opportunity to understand what happened in those most vulnerable hours? I'd like to finish by thanking every member who's come to the Chamber today to talk about this important issue, to thank Donna Ockenden and all that contributed to the creation of the review. But my greatest thanks goes to all the families who gave up their time to share their stories with me and remind me that those babies were people, not statistics. They are loved, they are missed, and they deserved better. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered maternity services.